for having me. It's very cool that such an international group of people here. I'm just going to attempt to remember how to share my slides in Teams, because thankfully I haven't had to do too much of screen sharing these days. Hang on. I think it's this one.
On right-hand top side, when you see the red button leave, if you go back left, share, and then you open that.
Ah, okay. I think it's maybe this one. Goodness gracious, that's it. All right. So can you see that? By any chance?
Yes, I can see that.
Yes, we can see that.
Oh, good. Cool. So my research examines how community-based music activities can be deployed to facilitate active citizenship, shared identities, cohesion, and sense of belonging. So this seminar is going to explore this in the context of individual English locales, which is, of course, where I'm based, through a series of case studies which represent varying ways music activities can increase active citizenship and the other things I mentioned. I will draw on a curated program of interventions and collaborations that were co-created with non-academic organizations and in the context of increased arts funding in the UK. So for context, over the past 15 years, England has undergone a gradual but deliberate devaluation of music through drastic reductions of school music provision, a slashing of arts funding, and an aggressive anti-arts as a career narrative coming from the government and echoed by national media. This little thing in the right-hand corner was put out by our Prime Minister at the end of the pandemic, encouraging people to change careers. So devaluation processes run in tandem with economic downturn and a widening of the wealth gap, reduction of government services, and an increased anti-immigrant rhetoric. I maintain that instead of removing music and the arts, it can be used as a tool to build citizenship and sense of belonging. So I'll provide an overview of the disciplinary approach that I use in case anyone's unfamiliar with it, applied ethnomusicology. Then I'll outline the case study interventions that have formed the backbone of my research. And finally, I'll provide a comparative analysis of these case studies, extracting the ways in which music worked to develop non-musical competencies and aiding in addressing individual community needs. So my approach of co-production and co-creation enables music interventions to address issues at the heart of communities. Moreover, it suggests how music outreach research in collaboration with local community music practitioners advocates for and expands the reach of activities, resulting in demonstrable impact within their specific localities. Ultimately, my research explores how grassroots music activities can contribute to bolstering local engagement, cohesion, and building healthy communities. My research is situated around the program of experimental music interventions, or a program of experimental music interventions falling under the broad aegis of the Cohesive Harmonies project, with each intervention aiming to explore place-based solutions through music. There we go. So Cohesive Harmonies is positioned within the discipline of applied ethnomusicology, which adds a practice-based element to ethnomusicology, which is, of course, the study of music in and as culture. So the applied part of this emerged in the last couple of decades when ethnomusicologists began asking, how can we use our investigations to make a difference for the people that we work with? It puts music cultural research to practical use in various contexts, academic and otherwise, including education, cultural policy, conflict resolution, social improvements, and community music. So projects are guided by principles of social responsibility and change, human rights, and cultural equity. There are several angles these projects can take. So one being conservation, so preserving and protecting music cultures, for example, making records of disappearing indigenous music and language on Easter Island or Rapa Nui. Advocacy, so using music activities to advocate for aspects such as community needs and social justice. Education, so just improving the lives and prospects through music-related education. Social cohesion, projects that use music to build bonds between disparate groups or communities. So the methods are similar to those of ethnomusicology, making use of ethnography, participant observation, interviews, that sort of thing. However, it's also typical for an applied study to include some kind of intervention, so an event or series of events initiated by the researcher in collaboration with communities or organizations. Essentially, instead of the researcher inserting themselves into a scenario which forms the object of research, the research environment's created. In addition to written outputs, the research findings are also communicated through non-academic channels such as public lectures, museum exhibitions, documentaries, and government white papers. So my transition from ethnomusicologist to applied ethnomusicologist occurred as a result of attending a Musicians Without Borders 5-day music leadership training, similar to the one that Mananita attended. I attended mine in February 2020. MWB is an international NGO that facilitates music outreach programs in various global conflict and post-conflict locales, such as Palestine, Kosovo, and El Salvador. MWB works to effectuate nonviolent social change via sustained musical interventions, and their 5-day training series trains practitioners in skills necessary to develop and deliver music outreach interventions in post-conflict communities, as well as with other vulnerable groups such as asylum seekers. As a side note, over the last year, I've collaborated with MWB to host their training series twice a year at my university, and we'll be doing so again next year if anyone is interested in attending. Although the training was intended to springboard a sort of European-based refugee music outreach project, the pandemic pretty much decided that that wouldn't be happening for me. And I was inspired instead to construct a UK-based project that encompassed the activities and values espoused in those trainings. And what emerged was my project, Cohesive Harmonies. So this is a program of interventions, as I said, situated in the field of applied ethnomusicology. And underpinning this research program is my training and ongoing collaboration with Musicians Without Borders. The project investigates the capability of music activities in facilitating active citizenship, shared identity, and social cohesion, the impact and importance of network creation amongst practitioners in this field, which is often an isolating profession with very little official training available, and how the use of creative and qualitative research methodologies can aid in the development and success of socially oriented music initiatives. The project was also inspired by stumbling upon the 2019 World Health Organization report that says, what is the impact of arts on health? The report defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or immunity, which situates health not only within the realm of the individual, but more broadly within society and culture. The 100-plus page report presents various case studies that mostly focus on physical and mental health, though largely neglecting the concept of social health once it gets into sort of the case study bit of it. I wanted to create a project that built on the report with a focus on the sort of social side, so active and adaptive citizenship, which describes the traits that belong to a person who feels engaged and included within their local communities, and also building non-musical competencies, which are skills, traits, and benefits that aren't musical as a result of participation in music activities. So the locally envisaged initiatives that make up Cohesive Harmonies take two research design frameworks towards project creation. Firstly, by creating interventions from scratch, which involve local organizations but are conceived by the researcher, myself in this case, to experiment with particular musical approaches. And secondly, through collaborations with non-academic entities where initiatives are created within their existing framework to accomplish specific organizational goals. So I will describe two projects for each of these approaches. So for this first approach, I'm going to describe two case studies that I constructed in my hometown of Bradford, West Yorkshire. So Bradford is, they're on the map, kind of actually right in the middle of the island practically. Bradford's a large post-industrial city in Yorkshire with the poverty that is often associated with these types of places after the mills and the mines closed, which was in the kind of 80s. It's very multicultural, including large South Asian communities and asylum seeker populations as well. Social issues are exacerbated by it also being divided along ethnic and geographic lines, resulting in undercurrents of mistrust and tension. The two projects I'm going to discuss were conceived as pilot initiatives which addressed, broadly speaking, social cohesion. So the first one was Virtual Harmonies. This was developed in collaboration with Emma, who's a trainer for Musicians Without Borders, and Touchstone Bradford, which is an interfaith arts charity. The charity's remit. Hang on. Computer. So, sorry about that. So the charity Touchstone's remit is to bridge social divisions and bridge intercommunity trust by bringing women from different faiths and cultures together through short-term arts initiatives. My initiative, Virtual Harmonies, ran during the COVID-19 lockdowns, and hence the name took the form of online songwriting workshops. So here my aims were to explore how accepted music tactics for building intercultural trust can be proactively deployed in a post-industrial multicultural community, and to explore these methods in a virtual setting. The workshops were situated around creating a music video which incorporated songwriting, audio and video recordings of the participants, and images that reflected the theme of the lyrics they would write. With limited time in the workshops, Emma and I decided to set a theme for the participants to songwrite about, and we chose the topic of swifts, the birds, who are remarkably resilient and spend most of their lives in the air migrating from southern Africa to the UK every year. So we structure the 4 workshops around different elements necessary for the final video, but oriented around collaborative activities, which would be typical of Musicians Without Borders trust building workshops. So the first session centered around creating a song melody. We gave the participants homework to use craft materials from a welcome pack to create a backdrop, which you can see here, which would be used in the video. The second session was focused around writing the lyrics for the song. The third was creating rhythms to go along with the lyrics, using household items to create a groove. And session 4 was dedicated to adding movement, which would be incorporated in the final video. Participants were paired up and created coordinated movements, which were then shared with the whole group, and the final product was watched in an online viewing party. And if we have time at the end, I can show you the video of that because it's lovely. Post-session interviews and surveys were incredibly positive, with participants saying they felt empowered and they did not know they were capable of musical product, and also created positive connections between them that have since led to real-life connections as lockdown restrictions lifted. Participants also valued the opportunity to collaborate and bond with people they wouldn't necessarily have encountered outside of the sessions, while having the opportunity to impart their individual character on the project. Preliminary collation of research indicated that the cohesion building techniques did transfer online with some amendments and were effective in encouraging intercultural communication, which then transferred offline. The sort of tasks that how you would online had to be very specific, more so than in person, and they of course took a lot longer than they would have in person. While the overall group participants can be as large as one would have as an in-person class, the in-class activities are more effective. Online it was more effective in groups of 2 or 3, because when people start talking, it got confusing. So in 2022, it became possible to build on the research from this project with a follow-on initiative more specific to the lived experience of several of Bradford's larger culture groups, and that involved the dole drum. This was entitled, quite creatively, the Bradford Dole Project, and it explored how multicultural significant instruments, such as the dole, could be effectively deployed in locally envisaged music interventions to foster cohesion, non-musical competencies, and shared local culture in this disparate community. The project consisted of 3 dole workshop series, 2 with Touchstone again, and 1 with Stand and Be Counted, which is a performing arts charity whose work focuses around asylum seekers. So for context, Doles are large barrel-shaped drums from the Punjab region of the Indian subcontinent. And this region was one that bore the brunt of the 1947 partition when it was divided by vacating British colonialists into East and West Punjab, which is now India and Pakistan. The dole was an important instrument in both folk and religious traditions in this previously multicultural region. And after partition, the drum held its significance to both sides and evolved in different ways, as well as in the emerging diasporic groups in England. So in Bradford, the dole is a significant emblem across the city's largest ethnic minority groups. It's also sonically and visually familiar amongst those without direct cultural experience of the instrument, due to, firstly, its usage in the British Bhangra genre, and secondly, in its prominent presence at private events such as weddings, as well as civic celebrations. So the Bradford Dole Project is a collaboration that emerged from noting the many cultural contexts in Bradford that the dole touched. Community interviews revealed that the dole, while still a prominent cultural symbol, was becoming less popular among younger performers, with voiced fears that dole expertise could disappear. Thus, there was a desire to expand its usage into new communities and genres. The Bradford Dole Project's aims are to utilize cross-cultural interventions to bridge community divisions by creating shared sonic and material meetings, introducing people from different cultures and genders to the music and the instrument. Oops. Sorry, didn't mean to play that. And developing methodologies to evaluate how musical activities can promote cohesion and inclusion across diverse communities. And that, for reference, I wasn't actually going to play that, but this is what we taught them in these workshops. And that beat is kind of the most recognizable beat in British Bhangra music, so it's really familiar to people. So the project explored two different strands of social cohesion. Firstly, interfaith cohesion, involving women, again, from across Bradford's religious groups. Here we ran 2 workshop series with Touchstone at different times of the year. And secondly, cohesion and inclusion between asylum seekers and local communities, working with SBC, again, the Performing Arts Charity, using the dole as a way for asylum seekers to interact with people from outside of their immediate situation. In the UK, asylum seekers are forced to live in hotels, basically, as well as engage with an instrument that was culturally significant to their new city. The basic workshop structure is to introduce participants to dole playing techniques, learn its most recognizable beat, which I just played you, connect with different tones through sound drawing, and to learn to improvise on it. So 2 key observations emerged through these workshops. Firstly, different participant groups recognize different things in the dole. Secondly, participants fostered these non-musical competencies that contributed to longer-term goals of cohesion, inclusion, and shared culture. With regards to the first observation, individual participants voiced different points of recognition to the dole. These included direct cultural links, indirect familiarity with the instrument where new understandings were facilitated, and unfamiliarity where new meanings were assigned. With regards to these direct cultural group or women from Pakistani backgrounds who had cultural familiarity with the instrument already, but had never played it. For example, a woman named Saima voiced that all through her childhood, it had been her dream to learn the dole, and it provoked nostalgic memories of time spent in a Pakistani village. Other Touchstone participants were outsiders to the dole, but had local and popular culture-related associations with the instrument. For these, greater connection came from gaining an understanding for an instrument they had previously viewed as a cultural outsider. And in the cases of those non-Muslim participants, learning the dole allowed them the opportunity for insider knowledge and experiences of an instrument they had some familiarity with due to its local significance, and therefore lent a feeling of closeness to the culture it was a part of. With the SBC participants, the power of connection to the dole emanated from a less tangible place. None of the participants had direct cultural familiarity with the instrument, nor were they from Bradford. So new meanings came from positive associations from home. For example, a Syrian man reminisced about seeing it in Bollywood films, while a Rohingya woman saw similarities with a typical drum from her musical heritage. With regards to the second observation, participants developed competencies that, although not directly related to the dole, aid with longer-term goals of cohesion and inclusion. 3 primary competencies emerged. One was confidence, next self-expression, and then English language pedagogy. So with regards to confidence, I conducted, after the workshop, I conducted several interviews, including one with the leader of the group, or the facilitator of the group, Rosie. Rosie had previously noted that her participants were quite shy, and she observed that drumming had improved their confidence and playfulness. She noticed their ability to have fun together emerged in our workshops, where they typically had stayed kind of in their own groups. With the touchstone participants, a confidence emanated from learning something new that they had previously thought impossible. One participant reflected that the dole was a huge part of my culture growing up. Traditionally, dole playing is something that the men did, but it's more acceptable for women now, and is something I would want to move forward with, having a little bit more confidence in my abilities. So with the second competency was self-expression. The dole sessions provided alternative forms of self-expression for people, including an improvisatory element, increased creative agency opportunities, as well as building musical confidence. Improvisation was presented as a kind of no wrong answers exercise, which allowed people the freedom to do what they wanted. It was an important aspect of building confidence to express themselves through rhythm. Also enabling self-expression was the sound drawing, which is we gave people a piece of paper and we had them draw pictures related to particular dole tones, and there were a few pictures of that on a previous screen. So some touchstone participants drew detailed pictures of nostalgic sonic-inspired scenes, while with SBC, Rosie just marveled at how the group was immediately at ease with something they'd never done before and understood it as an alternative form of communication. So the final theme that emerged was English language pedagogy. So lack of English proficiency is a barrier for asylum seekers engaging with host communities. Obviously, SBC's belief is that creative spaces are effective places to learn English, especially for those unaccustomed to classrooms. Creative activities that remove the need for writing and speaking necessarily allow them to feel they're communicating and often encourage them to speak English more. And this was demonstrated in the dole workshops, with Rosie noting that participants were communicative and outgoing more so than usual. And that was something that carried over into sessions after we had finished working with them as well. And again, it's hopeful that this will help them lead to greater feelings of inclusion in Bradford. So research derived from the Bradford Dole Project revealed several key findings. Firstly, that shared cultural experiences surrounding musical instruments were a powerful tool for building rapport in these multicultural arenas. The collective learning experience created a bonding opportunity from which new cultural meanings emerged. Secondly, the dole evoked different meanings for different individual participants depending on cultural background, but also creative alternative cultural significances. Thirdly, creative empowerment occurred at several levels. Firstly, all participants were in some capacity outsiders to the instrument, either by culture or gender. The workshops enabled the accruing of insider knowledge. Secondly, collectively going from knowing nothing to relatively quickly playing and improvising as a group was quite empowering. And thirdly, empowerment occurred by the creation of a common language and room for expression by the sound drawing and improvisation. Finally, the dole workshops provided an avenue for greater cohesion and inclusion. This occurred within the groups themselves, but also through facilitating the improvement of non-musical competencies and providing all participants an insider insight into an instrument with a strong Bradfordian symbology. Overall, these two researcher-driven interventions represent different ways music can build social cohesion, as well as other non-musical competencies through musical interventions. Obviously, there are positives and negatives to this sort of framework. On the one hand, interventions can be a bit more experimental and tailored towards specific avenues of inquiry. On the flip side, due to funding and staffing limitations, these have typically had to be for for us, short-term projects where recommendations are provided to the collaborators for them to take forward as they see fit. So in response to this sort of flip side of this, the negative bit of that, I'm at various phases of developing projects that take a different framework angle, and that is what I call organizational driven initiatives. And the two projects I'm going to talk about with that I've got in sort of various stages of development are collaborations with Dorset Music Service, which is in Dorset, which is on the south coast of England, and Soundwave, which is in West Cumbria. So my collaborator at Dorset Music Service is a lady named Peely, who's on the senior leadership team there. So for reference, in the UK, a music service is a public sector entity that's part of the council and delivers music activities in schools, community centres, and other public spaces across the county or region. While the music service is well respected within the region of Dorset, it's investigating ways to expand the reach of their music activities and demonstrate music's utility not only as a specific creative outlet, but also as something that could be used in other classroom contexts as well. This element is a source of our collaboration. From a research standpoint, one of the things I'm interested in developing is methodologies for tracking impact of music on communities. And Dorset presents an interesting location to start building this. So it's located, so here, south coast of England. It has the reputation of affluency because we've got a perceived and actually quite real north-south economic divide in the country. While there's some truth to this divide, actually quite a lot of it, Dorset is also, as so many places, a divided region. There are areas of high incomes which are above the national average, but also 11 of the wards, which are sort of sub-counties, fall within the top 20% most deprived neighborhoods in the country. So the levels of deprivation have adverse effects on health and well-being. It also creates cohesion concerns between the rich and poor areas. So my interest in working with this area is in part the disparity levels, but also the relative isolation in terms of being able to track the impact. It's also quite difficult to get to. Public transport exists, but is really limited. There are no airports in the county or even a motorway. The location, while contributing to issues of rural isolation, again, was sort of attractive to me because of the isolation as for examining the impact of music activity. So upon an initial site visit, it became apparent that there was a really good project that could emerge, which would have both implications for arts engagement research, local impact, and a potential for influencing national education policy. One of the highlights of the visit was watching my collaborator Peely deliver two 90-minute training sessions for emotional learning support assistants, which are ELSAs, what they call, in Livingston, which is a really affluent town, and also Chickerell, which is a very deprived area in the county. So ELSAs work with children who require extra support in schools for a variety of reasons. Peely's sessions were pilot programs to demonstrate how they could use music activities, how the ELSAs could use music activities as part of their existing toolkit. There are usually several ELSAs in each school, and their work does not typically involve music. The overall aim of the workshops was to give them an introduction to how music activities could support their work with both individual and group sessions. This included theoretical and practical elements. The theoretical concepts outlined the concept of music activities to regulate emotions, behavior, develop cohesion, and provide a form of expression. The practical elements presented activities that ELSAs could apply with their pupils, as well as introduce them to online resources they already had access to through the school system, which could also be used for this purpose. Initially, what was exciting to me about these sessions was Peely's direct usage of some Musicians Without Borders concepts, having attended one of my trainings last year, notably the Mates Keys, which I'm sure you'll hear a bit more about because I think Darren is coming to talk to you in December. But that is basically mind, air, trees, expression, and stretch. And these provide a framework for understanding brain regulation and trauma responses, basically. So Peely had given the ELSAs very clear, simple exercises, which tied to each element of that framework, geared towards helping students from a place of dysregulation to a focused state. These practical activities were demonstrated amongst the group. The schools also have a access to a variety of online musical resources, such as simple music writing software and activity ideas. She spent some time in the session showing participants how to adapt these to their purposes. But in conversations afterward, the idea behind a side project began to emerge. Peely had already begun to receive positive feedback from the sessions that I attended. Several had emailed directly saying they'd used particular practical activities with their students to great effect. The rest had filled in an online feedback form at the end of the session and listed as many activities as they could remember that they'd used with their groups and the ways in which those had been effective. Based on the positive feedback from these sort of pilot trainings that she's done, Peely and I decided to work together to develop an initiative based around this ELSA musical training. These would be informed by follow-up surveys and interviews with previous attendees regarding what they found the most useful and what they wanted more practice on, and also what further musical content they could benefit from. I'm in the process of setting up a feedback and impact tracking system that will run in conjunction with the trainings. We'll run an expanded series of trainings for these ELSAs in the catchment area of Dorset Music Service. This is going to firstly include an introductory workshop version, similar to those I witnessed Peely running. We'll also develop a round 2 training session, and that will give them the opportunity to expand their skill set and perhaps deliver exercises to the class to build confidence. Next spring, after the completion of this more developed round of trainings, we're going to host an in-service day for all the ELSAs who participated in trainings to allow them a space to present and share with each other how they've incorporated and adapted the music activities to their own practices. An important addition to the project is the collection of impact-related data. Currently, these trainings run sporadically with some initial post-workshop feedback forms, but no other follow-up. I'm in the process of setting up some interviews, which are going to be next week, I think, in a week and a half, in Dorset, designing to help design this follow-up feedback or the follow-up project. This comes in the form, so we're going to do short interviews, surveys, and feedback forms to collect and analyze what from the training was being used, what difference they'd been seeing in their students so far, and changes in student behavior outside of the sessions. The information is then going to be collated into a case study and educational policy white paper that will be presented as a model to other music services around the country. This intervention's impact lies in its capacity to influence Dorset Council's educational policy, as well as hopefully other councils in the region. The project's obviously aimed primarily at school-aged under 18 children, and as a byproduct of the ELSA trainings, their activities will develop non-musical competencies in their pupils centered around self and co-regulation. In a school setting, we anticipate that this will result in an improvement in educational outcomes and participation by the students. In a broader sense, this will support research about how kind of information gleaned from Musicians Without Borders trainings can trickle down to improve local well-being as well. So the second collaboration in this organization-driven approach is with a different Emma, who works for an organization called Soundwave. This is a charity that provides music lessons and sessions across West Cumbria. So West Cumbria is up there at the top. That's basically, that's the border of England and Scotland, more or less. This is a charity that provides music lessons and sessions there, mostly to youths aged 5 to 25, but also with an adult choir and performance series. In addition to extracurricular offerings, they provide most of the school-based music activities in the region. I chose this as a case study for several reasons. Firstly, the location is pretty unique. So West Cumbria encompasses the northwest corner of England, sandwiched between some of the more impressive mountains of our Lake District and also the Irish Sea. It's a really large area, but again, very, very isolated. The roads are very small and few. Again, no airport, and the train service is unreliable. The region's main industry is the Sellafield nuclear power plant, with a high proportion of the population working there and an overwhelming focus on the STEM subjects in local schools. It's basically a long way from everywhere. It boasts both high salaries, some of the highest in the country, but also high areas of deprivation. It has the second highest salary in the country after Chelsea in London. but yeah, also most of the rest of it is the most deprived areas in England. So, and Soundwave is the only music provider in the region. So while it is quite monocultural, white British, there's an increasing number of asylum seekers placed in hotels there, which also has the potential to create some friction. The isolated nature of Soundwave's working area and means that they are uniquely placed for measuring impact of the arts there, since, again, no other music organizations in anywhere nearby. They also had an interest in finding ways to measure their impact outside of the classroom. Upon visiting Whitehaven, which is one of the larger towns there, it became more apparent that this would be an organization to partner with, because Emma was also in a position to implement change. The isolated nature of the location and the fact that it's primarily made up of small, not very connected towns means it's more possible to track how arts activities change particular locales. And in conversation with Emma and her colleagues, a project began to emerge, situated around three primary themes. One is reviving the high street. So Whitehaven, like a lot of locations in the UK, has a high street primarily made up of closed shops or betting parlors, despite its stunningly beautiful location on a harbor. Soundwave has just moved their main offices into the city center of Whitehaven. So we're going to collaborate to track how we can to track the social impact of including more live music activities in the area. So the second angle is the development of an arts-based deindustrialization strategy. So Sellafield is going to be closing one of its reactors and thus drastically reducing its workforce. What we're going to try to do is collaborate on proposing an arts-based deindustrialization strategy, which is something that the council has already expressed at least a passing interest in. And thirdly, we're going to track the impact of their existing activities using qualitative research to help track the community impact of what they're already doing in schools. So the primary needs at Soundwave are kind of tied to the location. They want the region as a whole and the local council to recognize the arts as a viable career option and as essential for community building. Dave, who's the head of the organization, elaborated that it's not just playing the guitars, it's getting involved in community stuff, and it's the social side. And that's kind of their mantra, really. The project with Soundwave will involve using research to demonstrate, particularly to the council, music's capabilities as a career, as I mentioned, and more importantly, a mode of building community and reviving these high streets. The research side of this would involve writing up qualitative findings, but also sponsoring events, documenting change, and hopefully developing sort of a collaboration with my university to help get their students to basically visit universities and maybe have the opportunity for a scholarship of some sort. And once Soundwave's new building opens, we'll be documenting the change in the city center. I think some specific white papers could also document this positive social change and make a case for, again, this arts-based deindustrialization strategy. The other work would be advocating directly with local businesses to show the value of non-musical competencies that arise from doing music activities, demonstrating how encouraging arts could also help with employability skills and success in addition to this community building. Soundwave has also noted that they had difficulty getting a seat around the table at council events. As such, this project would be trying to advocate for them with regards to the West Cumbria cultural strategy. While this is still in its development phases, the non-musical competencies this project will focus on is social and active citizenship through its advocacy for arts employment. It will also be part of my broader research goals to develop mechanisms for tracking community impact of music activities. So, include Cohesive Harmonies, through its program of experimental music interventions, explores how community music-based activities can be deployed to facilitate active citizenship, non-musical competencies, shared identities, and social cohesion. Each sub-project focuses on a different method or context for investigating these. Looking at the first design framework of researcher-led interventions, The Virtual Harmonies project explored social cohesion in an online space that was at the same time quite place specific, in that the participants were from across Bradford's cultural groups. The Bradford Dole project continued with this place-based context, this time focusing on how a multiculturally and locally relevant musical instrument could aid in cohesion building, as well as developing other non-musical competencies such as English language usage and confidence. With regards to the second design framework of organization-driven initiatives, the Dorset Music Service project is in the context of schools and how music activities can be used to improve well-being behavior in an educational setting. Finally, the collaboration with Soundwave is in the context of an isolated community preparing for deindustrialization and arts-based initiatives developed to address this, as well as to assist in reviving the high street to increase social cohesion and developing mechanisms to track impact of in-school activities outside the classroom. While the Cohesive Harmonies project as a whole is still in progress, its initiatives are constantly looking to map music's capacity for activating non-musical competencies and engagement with research that focuses upon locally envisaged music interventions, projects informed by the needs of particular places that demonstrate an array of ways in which music can contribute to societal health and well-being. I would like to try to remember how to share audio and play this video for you to finish my presentation. So I might need you to tell me if you can hear this and then figure out what happens if you can't. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay.
We can't hear that. There is a technique we learned and then we forgot. Chen or anyone knows how to play the audio video at the same time?
I think I might have done it. Hang on.
Got it?
Let's see.
Okay.
Can you hear that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. I've done it then. All right, here you go.
Living in the air, amongst the clouds, amongst the rain, landing only to nest then, they travel again, flying fast like the whispers of grass, you see blowing in the wind at such incredible speed. Imagine that freedom to cross borders and not need documents to proceed. Imagine that freedom to breathe, to rest and breed in a place they find safe. Then the free will to leave.
Peaceful souls circling the skies, pausing in hope to birth, feed and nurture.
Peaceful souls circling the sky, pausing in hope to birth, feed and nurture.
She may appear slight to the human eye, but flying high, so high, she's the queen of the sky. Fork-tailed queen of the skies, weathering all storms,
working out your inner strength, unknown, arduous journey, take off, landless, eat, sleep, mate mid-flight, purpose, heart, endless yearning, turning, reeling, swooping, soaring spirit, talking, pausing, reassuring, liberating, freedom, full flight. Breathe,
flight to the human
breathe.
eye. They're flying high, offering so high. She's the queen of the sky.
The whole world is her home. The whole world is her home.
Unknown, arduous journey. Take off, landless.
She may appear slight,
Sleep. Mate mid-flight. Purpose, heart, endless yearning. Turning, wheeling,
Peaceful
sweeping.
souls soaring spirit, pausing in hope to bird,
From a bird's eye perspective,
of the sky,
the whole world is
weathering
there.
the storm to find her warmth.
Peaceful souls circling the skies, pausing in hope to birth, feed and nurture.
Working out your inner strength, unknown, arduous journey, take off, landless, eat, sleep, mate, mid-flight,
When they
purpose,
sleep,
heart,
do they dream?
endless yearnings,
What do they dream
turning,
of?
reeling,
Do their
swooping,
side-like wings
soaring
become
spirit,
stronger and more capable
talking,
of miraculous
pausing,
feats?
reassuring, liberating, freedom, full flight, breathe, breathe.
Pausing, reassuring, liberating, freedom, full flight,
So high.
breathe,
She's the queen of the sky.
breathe.
Thank you very much. Oops, hang on.